Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report, wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube. You know the deal. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media. That's AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now. I had one up yesterday about Sam Howell, one up now about Chase Young, and the excitement about Chase Young, but also surrounding the team with the fans here at the Commanders practice facility. So let's start there. Oh, by the way, before I continue, don't forget, I will be doing a live podcast. I'm going to do it at 1 p.m. Eastern time on Friday. I know that may not be the best time for all of you, but it's the time that's the time I got, and it's the time I'm going to do it. So join me if you can. Appreciate anybody who's able to tune in, and it'll be on the site later, and it'll be up as a podcast as well. So you can tune in for that later or come in there. I'm going to give you about 10 minutes of an update, and I'll answer questions for about 10 to 15 minutes so you can find out some of the questions that you want answered, and I can hopefully help you with what I've seen from the early part of training camp. Keep in mind, they still haven't put on the pads yet. And today there were no pads at all, no shells or anything like that. So they're really, it's just, as players like to say, the underwear Olympics. You can still learn some things, but you can't extrapolate and go too far with the meaning of everything until the pads come on. So let's set the scene for you here today, because a big story today was the return of the fans. It was the first day that practice was open to fans, and they showed up, folks. There were the team estimated around 3,000. I think that's a fairly accurate estimate. I was guessing around 2,500. They had around 3,000. Associated Press estimated around 3,000 as well, as did Scott Abraham from Channel 7. And so, like, there you go. So it's around 3,000. That's a really good crowd for a first day of camp, especially training out here in Ashburn. Not the easiest place to get to. It was at 9 a.m. And they also, I think fans had to get used to the idea of you're going to have to park somewhere else and then take a shuttle over to the facility. So the early part of practice, maybe there was about 1,500 here. And then as the shuttle buses were bringing people over, it got more and more full. So I'd say, again, around 3,000. And you'd have to go back to the RG3 days in Richmond when you get opening day crowds like that. And certainly, they used to get that back in the day, but it's been a little while since then. And, last year there were less than 100. I mean, it was pretty bad. I know some of that was the lottery system they had that wasn't working as well, but a lot of it, as you know, was apathy toward the team and the lack of excitement about the franchise in general. And that's what this is about right now. It's about the excitement about the franchise. Whether or not this team is any good this year, I think certainly fans seem to feel much more free to root for their franchise once again. And you saw it, and you could hear the enthusiasm when Josh Harris, a new owner, showed up. There were a couple chants of thank you, Josh, nothing like overly exuberant, but just certainly some people chanting that. He's signing autographs. He's getting pictures taken with people. He understands that this is a honeymoon period. Trust me, he understands that. He also knows if he doesn't win in a few years, that honeymoon period is not going to last that long. But I do think that the Commanders have the right group in charge to try to turn this around, not just turn it around, because they're not extremely far off from being a good team. We got to see about Sam Howell. We know that. But as far as being a sustainable winning organization, they weren't there yet because they haven't done that. They hadn't done that in more than 2 decades. So they're not there. They have some work to do, and they know it. But it's a big part of this equation is getting the fans back, selling more tickets to FedEx Field. That's one of the things that you talk to people in charge here that they feel like they've been doing very well. They're certainly selling more tickets to games. That Arizona game is close to a sellout. I think a big difference there is not only is it close to sellout, but it's close to a sellout by Commanders fans, not just because they're playing the Cowboys and you get half and half. That's a better sign. Now, how it goes the rest of the year, who knows? But in that first game, I think you're going to hear the most pro-Commander crowd that we've seen in a while there. And, I think the players consistently talk about what that means for them. And even Chase Young was talking today. He said, you look around this facility and there's video on the YouTube page on one of the shorts section that just shows you the facility. And he goes, it looks like it's an NFL practice. And he's right. This is how it should look, as you can hear planes flying overhead, as of course we're close to Dulles. You got some of the stands behind me right now. But, you hear that. And he even said that he kind of laughed because you hear the fans going crazy when he said, he looked around and the receivers are running routes on air. So there's no defense. McLaurin catches a long pass and the crowd goes crazy. I mean, within reason. That doesn't happen all the time, right? But that's when you know that they just feel good again about rooting for this franchise. So that's part of what was going on here. You had one fan yelling to Ron Rivera as he walked on the field. He got a nice ovation. Tress Way got a nice ovation as he walked. So did Chase Young, Terry, of course. But with Rivera, one fan yelled out, "No BS, Ron. It's all about football." And Ron, of course, acknowledged that because that's something that he knows very well, that this is the first time that he's really coaching this franchise when it is just about football. So there you go. And again, they know it's a honeymoon period. They know it won't last because you've got to build a winner for this to last. But it's almost like a rebirth. And there you go. So a lot of work to be done today with that. So let's get to on the field, catch you up on some of the highlights for practice. Again, no pads, so take it all for what it's worth, but we're seeing some traits. And one of the guys I want to talk about is running back Brian Robinson. I pointed out yesterday that he had the catch of the day, this little one-handed grab along the side, got his feet tippy-tapped his toes in, had another really, you can see the way they're using him, some routes down the seam, but also out of the backfield. He got Khalid Hudson one time on a route, and when I was actually happened to be watching that particular play at that time, because when I watch, whether it's a 7-on-7 or 11-on-11, it's hard to focus on everything all at once. So you go back and I try to watch who's the guy, what's the matchup I want to watch. And sometimes it means you miss something over here. But in this time, I'm I want to watch Hudson against Brian Robinson because I think both are key to what's going on here. Robinson, his development as a receiver, and then Hudson, his growth as a linebacker to help provide more depth. On this particular one, you could see Hudson, Robinson lined up offset as a running back. Hudson starts leaning out to the outside, doesn't want to get him that out, doesn't want to lose that outside leverage. So he leaning, and then the snap, Hudson is caught leaning. And Robinson comes out, does a little shake, and dusts him inside. Just a really nice move by Robinson, catches the ball. You had Cody Barton flying over, almost deflects it, but Robinson got it. Good throw. But just a good job with Robinson with his feet. And it wasn't that he couldn't catch it at Alabama. They said he didn't need to. They didn't need him in that role, but it's a role they want to develop with him here. So that was one play. Now, for Hudson, there was another time where there's a screen. I think it was to Robinson. He probably would have made the tackle on that play, but he kind of, you allow yourself to get blocked out of the play because you're not supposed to be tackling out here yet. And the play goes for a long gain, which the crowd liked. But I do think that he probably would have made the play on that one. So good job by Hudson there. And I think it'll be interesting to watch how Robinson evolves in this offense and the way they're using that RPO game, the impact it has on him. And one of the things that Sam Howell talked about on Wednesday was that RPO game. And it's something that he used that he was familiar with at North Carolina because they did a lot. So he said some of these concepts that he's running now are the same as what he ran at that they used at Carolina. They did not use the RPO a ton last year. It was not a big part of Scott Turner's offense, but it is a big part of Eric Bieniemy's offense. And Howell thinks it kind of will help the run game. So we'll see how it works with Robinson and Antonio Gibson. It could the main focus, cause indecision on the defense. You do that, now you have a chance. So there you go on all that. Oh boy, I also like how Cole Turner has been running and looking early in camp. I don't have any big highlights to discuss with him. Just that, don't forget about this kid. He was a talk of camp last year until he got hurt. And that you hurt that hamstring once, man, it can bother you for a long time. And it looks like he's running more freely. It seems to be doing a good job. I do think that he's a guy that he provides necessary size at that receiver position, at the receiving position, not receiver, but just as a receiver, he provides that necessary size. I think combined with Logan Thomas, they should be okay there as long as they stay healthy. So there you go there. And then I talked to you about Quan Martin yesterday, and I'm going to talk about this kid a lot because I really like him. And he's a guy that I think their first two picks will end up to be very good picks. But Quan Martin, I just really, really like. And I think he's a very smart player. And one of the things I know that one of the reasons they liked him is because he was taught by, for his first few years at Illinois by Lovie Smith. Now, Lovie wasn't there last year, but Lovie is a guy that Ron Rivera knows very well and respects very well. So respects a lot. And so they got good intel on Quan, but I know in the process, when they would talk to some of those Illinois players, they would talk about how well prepared they felt they were. And that's why when I talked to you yesterday about how settled he is with his feet, how patient he is with his feet in the slot, it comes back to, I think, the knowledge and the smarts for the game, anticipating, knowing what could be coming, and not falling for false moves, false steps, or et cetera. So he's just a guy, like I said, if I like him, so we'll see where it goes when the pads come on, but I do like him. I think he's going to be a good player for them. Let's go to the offensive line for a minute. Just looking at some of the backups, because I think there's going to be some interesting situations to develop there. Because right now the starters are, you got Leno, Charles, Gates, Cosme, and Wiley. So those are going to be your starters. And the backups, you have Daniels, 4th-round pick, you're going to keep. Stromberg, 3rd-round pick, you're going to keep. Inexperienced guys, obviously. And I think Daniels definitely needs some work before he becomes a legitimate contributor. And then you have Chris Paul, another young guy, inexperienced. But again, I told you yesterday that they want to at least get him some reps at tackle at some point. They do like him at guard. They like the way his body was reshaped, that he's in better shape this year than he was last offseason. So then what do you do? Like, Tyler Larson, he's primarily a center, but he can play guard. They need him to play guard because you can't have 3 guys on your roster that you just think will play center. You can't do that in this day and age. Nolan Laufenberg will be a guy to watch because he also can play center and guard. Might be a guy you can put on practice squad, elevate, but he can play center and guard. Mason Brooks is a guy that can play guard and tackle. And so I think he was a priority signing in free agents as an undrafted free agent. And I think he's going to be one to watch as we move into camp as well. So there you go with that. Now let's get to Dyami Brown, because he had a big catch today, probably the catch of the day. The offense was not great today. And I will say this, I think the defense should look better. They're further ahead. This is an experienced group. You have the same system, and it's your second year in the zone match coverage scheme. And one of the things Rivera talked about today was just that they've tweaked some of the zone match stuff because they can, because this group is now experienced it. Now you have Forbes and then Martin and some of the younger guys, but the key of this group is they're experienced in it. And so they can now build off of that. And the communication, Rivera said, has been better. So that's an area where they feel like really good. But it all adds up to why I think the defense is going to be ahead. The offense still learning. You have a quarterback who's young and inexperienced. You have a new offense, et cetera. So I don't freak out if the offense has some bad days. To be honest, if they don't have bad days, it's because maybe the defense isn't as good as we think it should be. Anyway, all that said, the first big play goes to Dyami Brown. And it was a deep ball from Jacoby Brissett. He was working against corner Tariq Castro Fields. So a guy that may not make the roster, but it was still a really good catch. It was a good throw from Brissett, but it was a really good catch. And it highlighted why they liked Brown when they drafted him. Speed to get downfield, but also making the contested catches. That's what he did here. So he kind of jumps up and turns a little bit, just out leaps Castro Fields for the ball, and then he falls to the ground and he held on to the ball. Just a good catch. Now, they need Brown to be productive. And I know he had one decent game last year, but there was only a couple catches. They need him to be a lot more productive. They feel like he will be in this offense because of his speed and the way Bieniemy is going to use him. And if he can get on that field, Hall has a deep arm, obviously their college connection, but it's more about the deep arm and being able to hit him if you have speed underneath. And then maybe you can free Brown to get open down the field. But he's got to be a bigger part, because otherwise you have 3 guys. And if something happens to one of those 3 guys, then because after the top 4, it's hard to see how good is that depth. That to me is a question mark. Now, one of the things to watch with those last couple guys is, can any of them replace what Cam Sims did on special teams as a gunner? So they have Marcus Kemp as a special teams guy. They signed Byron Pringle from the Chiefs. He can play special teams as well. And then Sample, the guy Sample is an undrafted guy. he's a guy to watch because he's got size. Now, is he going to make the roster? I don't know, but I think he's a guy that you could put on practice squad and see where he develops, and could he become again, a contributor there. But to be honest, like that Cam Sims role is a little bit surprised to let him get away, just because he did so much for them. And again, as a gunner, he was really, really good. So
the adventure park is ziplining through the trees. It's climbing from platform to platform. It's even an axe throwing competition with your friends. But what the adventure park really is opportunity. Reconnecting with friends and family, accomplishing a challenge, and making lasting memories. So book your visit today and choose your own adventure.
Anyway, let's stick to receiver, because I want to talk about Terry McLaurin. One of the things I love to do during camp, we can only tape on video about maybe 15 minutes or so of practice. And in that time, you get some individual drills, no one-on-one matchups anymore. So you're not going to see that from us. Fans in the stands can record the video. They do not let the media record it after a certain point, because their thought is that we have a bigger reach. Whatever, fans can do it. You can put it out there. We can see it. Thank you for that. But for me, what I like to do is I like to record the receivers, for example, then go back and see how they do it and use Terry McLaurin as the guide. So there were a couple of routes that even on Wednesday that I saw was just like a little quick 5-yard out, right? And so how does McLaurin do it compared to some of the other guys? Not all the receivers, but just in his group, the X receiver spot. And what you'd see is a lot of times on that second and third step, McLaurin's already into his turn. So by the fifth, so like he's got some guys might be turning on their inside foot. He's planning and turning, and he's getting into his turn quicker. And so by his fifth step, his head is already around. And you see some other guys, it might be their sixth step, their seventh step before their head gets around, because they're running, their routes aren't as crisp. The difference in that, here's the difference. That fifth, that his head turns around, quarterback's getting rid of the ball. And on a couple of catches, I noticed one receiver, and I forget who it is now. It doesn't matter. It's more just, the steps. The receiver who took 6 steps to get his head around, catches the ball, tippy toes, goes out of bounds. Terry gets his head around at 5 steps, catches the ball, has enough room on the sidelines to still turn up and turn it into a gain. Now, again, it was just an individual route, but in a game, those little extra yards matter. And when you do it precise, that's what happens. And that's one of the things that McLaurin does. Jahan Dotson's a really good route runner too. And I want to pay attention to what he does as well, for the same reason. But McLaurin, you saw that's one of the things that I always see. And it's something I always like to do because you learn a lot. And so there you go. There were a couple times he's not perfect. He did have one route against Benjamin St-Juste, and this says a lot about St-Juste and his ability to play physical. And McLaurin comes off the line, St-Juste jams him, gets his right hand in there on his pec and his chest, and stops him. He gets him. He wins the route because he was able to play physical, keep his balance. Just good technique by St-Juste. Now, McLaurin got Emmanuel Forbes later in the practice, and this is after the Dyami Brown catch. McLaurin beats Forbes, and I didn't see the start of the play. Like I told you, I'm not watching everybody on every play because it's hard to do that. He was on the opposite side. All I know is he was about 5 yards beyond Forbes, and he makes the catch for a long gain. So that's Terry McLaurin, folks. And by the way, linebacker Jamin Davis still working with the twos. And I know they did this with Cody Barton in the spring. They had him work with that while the others could kind of run at their fast pace while he was still working in the speed. And that's what, with Davis, again, that's why he was here with the rookies. Davis seems pretty fired up about what he could do this year. All right, let's get to Chase Young. And I talked about him yesterday as well. I'm going to briefly talk about him again today because he continues to look good. Again, no contact yet. And Charles Leno, the left tackle he's going against, when you can't really make contact with them, a good defensive end is going to win more often than not because you're going to limit your contact. But what I will say, what the good sign is, he is getting into Leno, and he was won some on the outside, he won some on the inside. Those are all good signs, and I'll be curious to see how that battle evolves when they get deeper into practice and they get the pads on. Also, now on the Eric Bieniemy, there goes some of my notes on the Eric Bieniemy update, because you always got to talk about Bieniemy. And again, I think the urgency in practice has been good. And again, I pointed this out yesterday. I like how receivers sprint to the line of scrimmage. He's very big at yelling at the guys to get out of the huddle, get up to the line, et cetera. He did have one time where Sadiq Charles has a false start. He sends the first offense off the field because of it. And so there you go. Anyway, all right, folks, that's it for me. That's the practice update for Thursday, July 27th. I'll be back with another update on Friday. Again, it's a 1 p.m. live podcast. Bring your questions. Pop in for it. I'll keep you only about 15, 20 minutes, so you can pop in for that. Tell your boss you're going to taking a bathroom break or whatever it is, and join me in there. Or maybe you just go out and get a quick brew. It's lunch, right? So there you go. Anyway, but join me 1 o'clock Eastern time podcast. Bring your questions. I'll answer as many as I can in about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll be good to go. So I'll talk to you next time.